Hello, and I'd like to welcome everyone to District 103, Channel 3, behind the scenes for the 2018 Toastmasters International Conference. I am happy to be your host and to also interview a wonderful person, Lance Miller.
Thank you. Great to
meet you, Lance.
Thanks.
So, welcome to Chicago. How do you feel?
It's always great to be in Chicago. I grew up a few hours from here, so I was up here a lot in my youth. I lived in Chicago for a short time. It's always fun to come back.
Well, that is good. So I know that you have pretty much been a motivational speaker. You have been a life coach to some. You have a lot of material. First, tell us, before we get too far, how can people find you?
The easiest way to find me is to just go to lancemillerspeaks.com or type in Lance Miller Toastmasters or Google Lance Miller Speaking. You'll get my websites and YouTube videos, all that on Google.
Very good. So I got a couple questions that we received from the audience, and we polled a couple people. And some of the questions are, they would say, hey, I'm interested in Toastmasters, but I'm really terrified. I have a lot of fear. What would you say to someone who came to you with that?
Well, to me, speaking fear or stage fright it's a temporary situation. To me, speaking is a muscle. You got to exercise it.
Sure.
And just like if you go, I'm really out of shape and don't have any energy, good, go to the gym. And you're not going to feel good next week, but 6 months from now, you're going to feel good. And it's the same thing with stage fright. You start speaking, and the only solution I know to stage fright is to get up and speak. And the beauty of Toastmasters, it's a loving, caring, nurturing environment. So you can screw up all you want in Toastmasters, and they'll still love you and want you to come back next week.
So when you did your first speech, to be honest, were you scared? Were you confident? Have you always had this confidence?
No. As a matter of fact, I can remember the first time I was called on stage, I was standing up there and my kneecaps were bouncing up and down, and I was concerned about, I was looking down and wanting to make sure I didn't bend my knees so people wouldn't see my pants shaking. And what's amazing to me is that it's nothing you can physically control. Like, I can't make my kneecaps bounce up and down.
Sure.
But I stood up in front of a group of people and my kneecaps bounced up and down all on their own.
Wow.
That I find is amazing. But what happens is the nerves and your confidence come up. It's like, probably the first time you rode a bike or the first time you went swimming,
sure.
Or if you skied, the first time you slid down a hill, you were nervous, you were scared, you were incompetent at what you were doing. As you gain competency, you gain confidence, and that nervousness goes away. And instead of being nervous with stage fright, you're excited with nervous energy, with the excitement of going and speaking, instead of being apprehensive, nervous energy.
So the next question is, when does the jitters, when does the bouncing knees, when does it stop?
Well, if I had a formula for that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, okay? I'd be sitting on my own mansion in the Bahamas right now. But it takes as long as it takes, and for everybody it's a little different in the environment that you're in. That's one of the reasons I think, as an example, in Toastmasters, you can get really comfortable in your club, but then you go to a contest,
Sure.
and you're really nervous because you're speaking in front of an audience you don't know.
Yep.
You're competing against people you don't know. And that's the beauty of the contest. They offer so much growth, both on the speaking side and
Sure.
the leadership side, because somebody has to organize and structure that contest and put that event on, and that gives us leadership skills. Competing in it gives us speaking skills. And it gets us out of the club, and it builds a stronger, area, division, district by getting Toastmasters together in that friendly environment. But I totally accredit the speech competitions and the competition track to developing my speaking, not speaking in my club, because you get really comfortable in the club. Some people will even write their speech on the way to the meeting.
Which is
One person in Toastmasters does that.
Is that a best practice? No. It shouldn't be. Another question that we polled it very well is, some people say, I want to join Toastmasters. It sounds like a pretty good thing to do, but I have nothing to talk about. What would you say to someone to convince them that they do have something to talk about?
Well, first of all, if they have nothing to talk about, then they should talk about the fact they have nothing to talk about. They can talk about that. I had a lady one time, I was actually in London, and she said, we were in a seminar, and she raised her hand, and she said, I've had writer's block for the last 3 years and I can't think of what I should speak on and I can't write. And what should I do? And I said, you should do a speech on writer's block.
There you go.
You would be the preeminent authority about writer's block because you had it so long, and get up and tell everybody how you have it. You can't, and you will have volumes of information. The truth is, we all have 10 things to talk about. That's like saying, I can't observe life. I have no feelings. Everything's gone beautifully for me in my life. I've had no struggles. I've had no ups and downs. I've never had a bad day. I don't have anything to talk about.
That is powerful. No, that is very powerful.
Well, it's the truth.
Right.
The whole aspect of speaking is looking at everyday events and putting your creativity into what's special about that event and putting your own artistic, creative life into that moment to bring it to life for other people.
Well, that is wonderful. I think a lot of people are going to see that message and now be encouraged to actually take that first step to go to their first meeting. Do you have any speeches that you've written that really made you vulnerable, or you just thought, I needed to have this message and present it to the world?
Well, my world champion speech was one that is very close to home with me. And it deals with, I think we all have different struggles. One of the struggles I had was actually dealing with a significant amount of being told I wasn't quite good enough.
Sure.
Since I was at a young age, so you start believing that. And then the problem is when you have sort of a sore spot in your esteem like that, when anybody tells you you're not quite good enough, it sort of like hits that button.
Sure.
You know, because if you're toughened up on that, it doesn't bother you. But when anybody would come in and just say, Lance, you're not quite this, man, it would just really hit me. And it was the people around me that were really bringing out my best and telling me I'm doing a great job. And the difference that made, and when you worked on, my speech was about validating what's right in people. When you worked with really bringing out the best in people, what it did, versus always trying to point out how they're not quite okay.
Sure.
And that's a huge point of demarcation, not only between friendships, families, businesses, communities, but in nations. You look at the struggles we have as people on planet Earth. It's one group of people saying the others aren't okay. There's something wrong with you. You're less.
You're right about that.
And if we just said, you know, and I talk about, like, let's take Israel and Palestine. If Israelis started telling the Palestinians they made great tabbouleh, and the Palestinians said, I like your matzo balls, we'd be that much closer to peace.
Closer to world peace. And we need to have world peace.
Yeah.
We need to have world peace. Is there anything, a message that you would like to leave the perspective person who's interested in Toastmasters?
Well, here's a simple thing about Toastmasters. To me, it's like going to the gym. And instead of exercising our muscles, we're exercising our communication and our leadership skills, our meeting management skills. And these are the critical soft skills you need to get along in life. And I really think you can come in Toastmasters and become a good communicator and run meetings and have leadership skills, and it totally changes your career path. It changes the opportunities you have because you can deal with human beings.
Correct.
And very few places on earth, very few schools give you the empirical experience day in, day out of dealing with these strange, odd people that join Toastmasters.
That is true.
And about the time you think you have some strange, odd duck in your club, you run into that same type of person at work or in the community, and you go, there was someone like you in my club, and I know exactly how to work with you.
I've heard some people say this, that Toastmasters is somewhat more important in their lives than getting the Masters. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, they're two different skill sets. The truth is, the higher up in an organization you go, the more soft skills you need.
True.
When you're down in the bottom, you need your hard skills, your engineering skills or your computer programming skills or whatever the skills you are. But when you come up into an organization, you're now dealing more with people than you are the hard skills. So it's two, it's like saying running is more important than eating. You need to have both of them. So you need to have your formal education because you need to have some expertise in some areas, but you also need to have those interpersonal skills, those soft skills of knowing how to deal with people, motivate them, evaluate them, listen to them, give them feedback, encourage them, inspire them. All those aspects on the human side, we need to develop that, and that's what Toastmasters delivers.
Lance Miller, it's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining District 103, Channel 3. For behind the scenes at the 2018 International Toastmasters Conference. Thank you all. Goodbye.